I was lounging on my couch, scrolling through my phone, enjoying the quiet of my small apartment. It was one of those rare days off where I had nothing planned, just me, my thoughts, and the gentle hum of the city outside. Then, the doorbell rang, slicing through the silence. I wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, I got up and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. The sight on the other side made my heart skip a beat. It was my mother, Anne. I hadn't seen her in years, not since I was a little girl. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then, gathering my thoughts, I opened the door. There she stood, looking so different from the woman I remembered. Her once bright, alert eyes now seemed dull and tired. Her hair, which used to be neatly done, was now unkempt and graying. "Emily, it's been so long," she stammered, her voice trembling. I wasn't sure how to respond. "Mom, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you. I've missed so much, and Her voice trailed off as she looked down, avoiding my gaze. I felt a wave of emotions, from anger to confusion. "Missed me? You were gone, Mom. You left us." "I know, and I'm so sorry, Emily. Can we talk?" I sighed, stepping aside to let her in. The apartment suddenly felt smaller with her presence. We sat down, the air heavy with unspoken words and years of absence. "Why now, Mom? Why after all these years?" She looked at me, her eyes welling up. "I made mistakes, Emily, big ones, and I want to try to make things right, if you'll let me." I was skeptical, not sure if I could trust her words, but a part of me wanted to hear her out, to understand why she left and why she was back. "Okay, Mom, let's talk." As she started to speak, I braced myself. This was going to be a long conversation, one that I never imagined having. But here we were, about to unravel years of silence and hurt. As I sat across from my mother in my living room, her presence stirred up memories I had long tried to bury. I found myself drifting back to when I was 7 years old, the year everything changed. "Dad, where's Mom?" I remember asking one evening. My father, David, was tucking me into bed, his face shadowed with worry. She's gone away for a bit, Emily," he had said softly, trying to mask his sadness. "Gone away? Where?" "Just away," he had replied, forcing a smile. "But I'm here, and I'll always be here for you." Those words stayed with me as I grew up. My mother, Anne, had left us without a word, leaving Dad and me to fend for ourselves. It wasn't easy for Dad, juggling work and raising me alone, but he never complained. He was my hero, always there with a hug and a joke to make me smile. Then, 3 years later, Sarah came into our lives. She was Dad's co-worker who became a friend and, eventually, much more. I remember the day Dad introduced her to me. "Emily, this is Sarah. She's a very special friend," he had said, his eyes bright with a happiness I hadn't seen in a long time. "Hi, Emily. Your dad's told me so much about you," Sarah had said, kneeling down to be at eye level with me. "Are you going to be my new mom?" I had blurted out, curious and a little wary. Sarah had laughed gently. "Well, I'd like to be your friend first. Would that be okay?" I had nodded, and from there, Sarah became a constant presence in our lives. She was kind and patient, never trying to replace my mom, but instead creating her own special place in my heart. She helped me with my homework, listened to my endless stories, and was there for every school play and sports day. "Dad, I like Sarah," I had told him one night. "She makes you happy." "She does, Emily. She makes us both happy," he had replied, hugging me close. Looking back, those years with Dad and Sarah were some of the best of my life. They filled the gap left by my mother's absence, creating a new, different family dynamic that I cherished. Now, sitting across from Anne, I realized how much of my childhood she had missed and how much of it had been shaped by her leaving. There were so many questions, so much to process. I took a deep breath, ready to dive into the past and confront the memories head-on. Life, as I had come to know it with Dad and Sarah, took another turn when I was 25. That year, we faced the heartbreaking loss of Dad. It was a sudden and painful event that left a void in our lives. I remember the day vividly. Sarah and I were in the kitchen when we got the call. I could tell from Sarah's face that something was terribly wrong. "Emily, it's your dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's been an accident." The drive to the hospital was a blur. We arrived only to be told that Dad had passed away. I felt numb, unable to process the news. Sarah held me as I cried, her own tears mingling with mine. In the weeks that followed, Sarah was my rock. She took care of everything, from the funeral arrangements to comforting me. I was lost in grief, but Sarah was always there, offering a shoulder to cry on and words of comfort. "Emily, your dad loved you so much," Sarah told me one evening as we sat in the living room, surrounded by Dad's photos. "He was so proud of the woman you've become." "I miss him, Sarah. I miss him so much," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I know, honey. I miss him too. But we'll get through this together. We're family," she replied, holding me tight. That moment solidified something I had always felt. Sarah was more than just my stepmom. She was my family, the one who stood by me through the darkest times. Her presence gave me a sense of stability and comfort when everything else seemed to be falling apart. As time passed, Sarah and I grew even closer. We leaned on each other for support, finding solace in our shared memories of Dad. She encouraged me to pursue my career and was always there to celebrate my successes and comfort me in my failures. Looking back on those days with Anne sitting in front of me, I realized how much Sarah had stepped in to fill the void left by both my mother's absence and my father's passing. She was a constant source of love and support, something I wasn't sure I could ever expect from Anne. "Mom, Sarah was there for me in every way. I don't know what I would have done without her," I said, meeting Anne's gaze. Anne looked down, her expression a mix of sadness and regret. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, Emily. I truly am." Her apology hung in the air, a stark reminder of the years lost and the relationships that had been strained beyond repair. I was grateful for Sarah's presence in my life, but part of me still yearned to understand why my mother had left in the first place. Sitting across from my mother, Anne, in the dimly lit living room, the silence between us felt heavy. I finally mustered up the courage to ask the question that had been burning inside me. "Why did you leave, Mom? Why did you just disappear from our lives?" Anne shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Emily, it's complicated. I was young, confused. I thought I needed something more, something different. But you had a family, a daughter who needed you," I said, the hurt clear in my voice. "I know, and I regret it every day. I thought I was missing out on life, but I didn't realize that I was leaving my life behind." Her words stung. It was hard to reconcile this regretful woman with the mother who had walked out on us. "Did you ever think about us? About me?" I asked, looking for some semblance of remorse. "I did, Emily, but every time I thought about coming back, I felt ashamed. And then I got sick. Really sick. It took me years to recover." I was skeptical. "Sick? Is that just an excuse to come back into my life now?" "No, it's the truth. I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. It took a lot out of me, but now I'm better, and I want to make things right with you." I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, disbelief. It was all a jumbled mess inside me. "So, why didn't you reach out sooner, after you got better?" "I was scared, Emily. scared that you and your father would reject me." "Mom, Dad passed away 2 years ago," I said, a lump forming in my throat. Anne's face fell, a look of genuine shock crossing her features. He's gone?" I nodded, the pain of his loss still raw. I didn't know. Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry." Her apology felt empty, too late. I couldn't help but feel that her return had more to do with her needs than mine. As we sat there, I realized that the past couldn't be changed, but I had a choice about what to do with these revelations. I could hold on to the anger and pain, or I could try to understand and maybe find some closure. It was a lot to process, and I wasn't sure where to start. "I think that's enough for tonight, Mom. We can talk more later," I said, standing up. Anne nodded, looking defeated. "Okay, Emily, I'll give you some space." As she left, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was still the abandoned little girl, while another part was an adult, trying to make sense of the past. One thing was clear: this conversation was just the beginning. After several days of mulling over our last conversation, I decided to give my mother, Anne, another chance to explain herself. We agreed to meet at a local coffee shop, a neutral ground away from the memories of my apartment. As I sat across from Anne, sipping my coffee, I noticed how she nervously twisted her napkin. It was clear she had something on her mind. "Emily, I'm grateful you agreed to see me again," she started, her voice shaky. "I know I've missed so much, and I can never make up for that. But I need to ask for your help." I put my coffee down, a sense of apprehension building. "What kind of help?" It's about my living situation. Since I got better, I've been staying with a friend, but I can't stay there much longer. I've found a small apartment nearby, but I can't afford the rent on my own." I felt a knot in my stomach. This was the last thing I expected. "Mom, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm ready to—" She cut me off. "I understand, Emily. It's just, I have nowhere else to turn. It's hard for me to ask, but I need this." I was torn. On one hand, she was my mother, and she seemed genuinely in need. On the other hand, I couldn't shake off the years of abandonment and the recent revelations. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. "It's $2,000 a month. I've saved up some, but I need help covering the rest. Maybe just for 1 year, until I get back on my feet." I did the math quickly in my head. It was a significant amount, especially on top of my own expenses. "Mom, I'll need to think about it. This is a lot to ask." "I know, Emily, and I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. Please think about it. I want to rebuild our relationship, and being closer would help." We finished our coffee in silence. As I walked back to my apartment, her request weighed heavily on me. Part of me wanted to help, to maybe start mending our broken relationship. But another part was hesitant, unsure if this was just another disappointment waiting to happen. I knew I had a tough decision to make. After grappling with my mother's request for financial help, I reluctantly agreed to pay her apartment rent for a year, a decision that left me feeling uneasy. The sum was substantial, $24,000, but a part of me hoped this gesture might bridge the gap between us. A week later, I decided to visit her new apartment unannounced, hoping to see how she was settling in. As I approached her door, I overheard voices inside, loud, boisterous, and unmistakably Anne's. Curious and concerned, I paused to listen. "Can you believe it? My own daughter, such a fool to pay a whole year's rent up front. Talk about easy money." Anne's voice echoed through the thin door, dripping with mockery and amusement. My heart sank. I felt a mix of anger and betrayal swirling inside me. I had extended a helping hand only to be laughed at and taken advantage of. Mustering my courage, I knocked loudly on the door. The voices hushed as Anne opened the door, her expression turning from jovial to shocked upon seeing me. "Emily!" What? What a surprise, she stuttered, trying to mask her guilt. I stepped inside, facing her directly. I heard what you said, Mom. About me, about the rent. Anne's face went pale. Emily, It's not like that. You misunderstood. No, Mom. I understood perfectly, I replied, my voice steady despite the hurt. I thought we could rebuild something, but I see now that was a mistake. She reached out, trying to touch my arm, but I stepped back. I wanted to believe in you, Mom. I wanted to believe you had changed. Feeling a sense of finality, I pulled out the document I had brought with me, the rental agreement. I should tell you, I only paid the rent for 1 month, not a year. Anne's eyes widened in disbelief. But you said... I said I would help you, and I did, but I wasn't going to let you take advantage of me. You'll need to find somewhere else to live after this month is over. Turning away from her stunned expression, I walked out of the apartment, leaving behind her cries and pleas for forgiveness. It was a harsh lesson in trust, and one I wouldn't soon forget. As I walked away, I knew this marked the end of any reconciliation with Anne. The hope of a mother-daughter relationship had been shattered, replaced by the stark reality of her betrayal. After the revelation of my mother's deception, I felt a mix of anger and heartache. I needed someone to talk to, someone who would understand, so I went to see Sarah, my stepmom. She had always been my pillar of strength, especially in times of turmoil. When I arrived, Sarah could tell something was wrong. "Emily, what's happened? You look upset," she said, her concern evident in her voice. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared countless conversations over the years. "It's Mom. She tricked me, Sarah. I paid her rent, thinking I was helping, but she was just using me. And then she laughed about it with her friends." Sarah's expression turned from concern to anger. "That woman! After everything she's put you through..." "I'm so sorry, Emily." I could feel the tears welling up. "I thought maybe she had changed, that we could have some sort of relationship. But I was wrong. She hasn't changed at all." Sarah reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "You're a kind and generous person, Emily. You did what you thought was right. Don't let her actions make you think otherwise." "But I feel so stupid, Sarah. I should have known better," I replied, my voice cracking. "Emily, you're not stupid. You're human, and you have a big heart. Sometimes that means you get hurt, but it's also what makes you so special," Sarah said, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. We talked for hours, Sarah listening and offering advice. She reminded me of the strength I had within me, strength that had carried me through tough times before. As I was about to leave, Sarah stopped me. "There's something you should have. It might help if your mother causes any more trouble." She handed me an envelope. Inside were legal documents. The ones that showed my mother's parental rights had been terminated years ago. "If she tries to demand anything from you, these will protect you. Legally, she has no claim over you or your finances," Sarah explained. I hugged her, grateful not just for the documents, but for her unwavering support. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." As I left Sarah's house, I felt a sense of clarity. The situation with my mother was painful, but I wasn't alone. I had Sarah, and I had a resilience that had been tested but not broken. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but I knew I could handle it, with Sarah by my side. 2 weeks after the revelation of my mother's deceit, I was startled by a loud banging on my door. With a sense of foreboding, I opened it to find Anne, her face twisted in anger and desperation. "Emily, you have to pay for my housing. If you don't, I'll sue you. I'll demand alimony from you every month," she shouted, her voice echoing in the hallway. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, her audacity was astounding. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief, but I remembered the envelope Sarah had given me. "Mom, You really think you can demand anything from me? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, I'm your mother. It's your duty to take care of me, she retorted. I couldn't help but laugh, a reaction that seemed to infuriate her even more. You're not in any position to demand anything, Mom. You gave up that right a long time ago. Anne's face contorted in confusion and rage. What are you talking about? I reached for the envelope Sarah had given me and pulled out the legal documents. These papers, they show that you legally relinquished your parental rights over me. You have no claim to any money or support from me. Anne's eyes widened as she skimmed the documents, her face turning pale. This can't be. It's over, Mom. You can't use me anymore, I said, a sense of finality in my voice. I stepped back and closed the door in her face, cutting off her protests. She continued to yell and bang on the door, causing a commotion that drew the attention of my neighbors. Within minutes, the situation escalated to the point where someone called the police. I watched from my peephole as officers arrived and spoke with Anne, who was still shouting and causing a scene. They eventually escorted her away, her angry shouts fading into the distance. As the door closed and silence returned, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was a difficult and painful chapter of my life, but it was finally closed. I had my own life to live, free from the manipulation and deceit of the past. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I was strong enough to face whatever came my way. With Sarah's support and my newfound resolve, I was ready to move forward.